Hello, welcome to another episode. Guys, before this episode begins, take a look at how long it is. It's basically 3 hours long. This kind of went off the rails real quick, and it's a long one. I basically wanted to do all the applied energistics things in one episode. And I knew it's a lot of stuff, but I didn't expect it to be 3 hours long. So please use the chapters included below to kind of skip around and look at the things that you want to look at. If you're following along my NoBees series, this is how I'm going to have everything set up. So you'll see how to do all of this until the end of the, or by the end of the episode. But this episode is basically going to be kind of tutorial style, where we cover applied energistics. I mean, I spent like over 40 minutes just talking about P2P tunnels. And we're going to do ExtendedAE, AdvancedAE, AppliedFlux. We'll get into mega cells and bulk storage cells. We get into P2P tunnels and how to use those, subcontrollers and networks, and how I set up all of my autocrafting with these guys. And so, I mean, it's jam-packed with a ton of information. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you learn lots and lots of things. Hello there. Let's talk about applied energistics, specifically applied energistics in all the mods 10, but the information in this video will be relevant, no matter what you're playing. So applied energistics always starts out at a meteor, much like this one. You can find these by just looking through on your map, and they're really easy to spot. Like there's one here and one here. If you don't see one of those, or you don't have your map discovered, you can make a meteor compass. And you do that by putting it inside of a charger, and you put a wooden crank on it, and you crank that baby until you get a meteor compass, and that'll point you towards here. Then you're going to want to break these sky stones in the center, and you will find this thing. So this will give you this mysterious cube, and when you break the mysterious cube, you will get some of these presses that will be used to make processors, and then the guide. The applied energistics guide is actually very, very useful, and you should use this for sure, but also pay attention to this video. But you don't actually need to hold this item. If you ever hover over any applied energistics item, you can hold G or whatever your keybind is set to, and that'll open up the guide, and you can look at all the different things. And this is nice because if you look at something like the controller from applied energistics, and you press G, it takes you to the controller page. So it takes you directly to where the information is relevant. Okay, so you want to break that mysterious cube, and then you will also need to get some of these Certus quartz. Anything like this, you can just break and then turn that into Certus quartz crystals. But you also want to look for something that is a flawless budding Certus quartz block. And if you break this, it will degrade. So you want to move it using something like a cardboard box. So you can take that home with you. Or you can use a cut paste gadget or anything that can move entities like that. And you can see these other ones are all damaged. You don't want the damaged ones because they continue to degrade and then turn into a Certus quartz block. So they'll stop producing these crystals. After you find a meteor and grab your flawless budding crystal block, you can set up a little automation like this one. So this flawless budding block is growing Certus crystals. These growth accelerators, also from applied energistics, tick accelerate how fast this grows, so it makes it faster. And then I just have a block breaker here with Fortune 7 breaking the Certus cluster. And this being up for maybe an hour or two has produced 215,000 Certus quartz crystals. If you are making seeds for mystical agriculture, do note that this is a compressed block, so it's not a normal one. You need to combine 9 blocks together to get that. Otherwise, the seed won't craft. So however you want to make your Certus quartz, don't matter to me, just get some. You will also want to make charged Certus quartz, and to do that, through applied energistics, you need one of these chargers, and you give it power, and you can put a piece of Certus quartz in there, and it turns into charged. And you can automate this however you want. But this is all the mods 10, and you can also get this through Power. So I have power automated here, and I can just toss in my Certus quartz over there, and that turns it to the charged variant. After that, you'll quickly realize that most things with Applied Energistics require these processors, and to make it, it's a little bit of a process, no pun intended. But you will need to set up some Inscribers early on to get these processors, and I'm going to use Super Factory Manager to do that. I like to use Super Factory Manager because I can dump all of the materials inside of one barrel, walk away from it, and then come back a little bit later, and you'll notice that it's all done. So let's see how I set this up. I have 16 Inscribers that I'm going to automate. So I will put down some inventory cables over here. And this makes Super Factory Manager makes your life much, much easier with this, because otherwise it can take a while to get these things set up. And just follow along what I'm doing and everything will be okay. So I have these Inscribers set down, and we will put down a barrel over here, and then our manager I can put over there. Now I have this code already written, which I will post in the description below, and you guys can just copy this code and your automation will work just the same as mine. In this playthrough that I'm doing, I have silicone, printed silicones automated as like a passive crafting thing. So you can see I already have 25,000 printed silicones, and this code is adapted to work with the printed silicone, but I will also paste the code that will print the silicone as well. So when you toss in the materials, you can toss in normal silicone, and it'll make that for you as well. And you can see silicone, you just smelt quartz or however method you want to make that. Just follow JI. I'm not going to spend time on recipes. Okay, so for this setup, we need a bunch of Inscribers. However many you want is fine. You need at least 2. And then we need a power source, which I'm using an EnderCell, and then a barrel so we can input-output things from. Then use your label gun, shift right click on the manager to pull the labels, and we have 4 different labels. So we'll label the barrel, we'll label the EnderCell, and then we want to label circuits and processors. If you take a look at any of these processors, you can see that first you need to make these logic circuits or whatever kind of circuit it is, and then you combine it together to get the processor. So in the first 4 of these, or the first 8 of these Inscribers, we're going to be making the printed circuits, and the next 4 will be crafting the processors. So we label those guys. Don't forget to push your label into the manager block. If you're wondering how Super Factory Manager works, I have a guide on that. I'll leave below as well. You can check that out. I'm not going to talk about that in this episode because there's already a lot to cover. But if you follow along what I'm doing, it should be fine. Okay, so now even though these Inscribers say that they are offline, you can see that they have power inside of them. And to make these printed circuits, you can see that it requires presses. And the first thing we want to do is make the universal press. If you look at the recipe, you need some sky steel ingots, and then you combine the 4 presses you got from the Meteor together to get a universal press. And to get sky steel, Applied Energistics has a lot of in-world transformation crafting recipes where you throw things either in lava or inside of water. And we can use charged Certus quartz iron and the sky stone we got from the Meteor to create that sky steel ingot. We turn off our magnet, and then you literally just toss these things in lava, and it will craft into the ingots. All right, now we can craft our universal press. And we want to duplicate this because we will need at least 8. So let's grab some iron blocks. 7 of them. And we're going to put this in the Inscriber and then put in our iron blocks. And you can see that it starts crafting into more universal presses. And we can use those to put inside of the first 8. So the first 8 of these inscribers get the universal press, and the last 8, so the ones that are labeled with circuit get the universal press. The ones that are processor do not get the universal press. Once the first 8 or all of the circuit inscribers have presses inside of them, you're ready to craft. This is all the setup is. So let's go ahead and get some crafts going. The first ones you want to make are the calculation ones, because then you can make acceleration cards and make these guys even faster. So let's grab some Certus quartz, and I will do 9 of those, 9 stacks, 9 stacks of redstone, and 9 stacks of the silicone. And you literally toss all of these inside of there, and it's fully automated. Super Factory Manager is going to make them and then combine it into the processors. So when mods like Super Factory Manager exist to make your life easier, do that. And you can toss in gold as well for the logic processors. You can also do diamonds for engineering. This code works for all of the processors or that exist in all the MOS 10. So it will do accumulation. You just have to do this one separately from all the other ones. So don't have accumulation in the same barrel at the same time. Then it will also do, this one is fine. It'll do the energy processors. It'll do concurrent. It'll do Entro. So with this setup, just toss the materials in there, and it'll just craft everything for you. We already have 90 of the calculation processors. The only thing you really have to worry about with this code is just the accumulation processor, because it uses Fluix dust. You can't mix it in the barrel at the same time as other resources, but otherwise the rest of the resources can be mixed together. So once we have these calculation processors, let's go to make acceleration cards so we can make this even faster. But you may notice that acceleration cards require Fluix crystal. And this is another very common crafting ingredient used for applied energistics. And you make it the same way with dumping it into a fluid, in this case, water. So we take another piece of charged Certus quartz, redstone, and nether quartz. And this time we throw these guys in water. And that will turn into Fluix. Then we take our Fluix and our calculation processors, and we can make these advanced cards. And with the advanced cards, we can make acceleration cards. So now you can see this is not too slow, but it's kind of slow. But as soon as we add the acceleration cards, you can see how much quicker that goes. So we're going to add that to all of our machines. And it's going to make this processor much faster. So you can now take a look at all of the processors being pumped out. So I am also going to go over the code and setup of how to make the processors if you only have silicone instead of having the printed silicones already. Just so if you guys are doing that, you can follow along this way. If you set it up the other way, just use the chapters below to skip ahead in this section. So we start out the same way with these inventory cables, and we're going to set down 3 rows of inscribers. And I already have the acceleration card, so I'm going to put those guys in there. And you guys saw already how we made these universal presses, and I'm going to put universal presses in the first 2 rows. So the way that this is different is we also need to make the silicone presses, and each type of resource is going to need its own silicone. So with these first row of inscribers, we are going to make the circuits. The second row, we're going to make the silicone presses, and the third row, we're going to combine the ingredients together. So let's set this up. Here is the code that has the silicone inscribers in it. So in the description below, I'll have both of them and copy whichever one is appropriate for your setup. So we set those guys up. We're going to put all these guys in the barrel and copy the labels. These Inscriber silicones will be the center row. The processors will be the last row that have no, no press inside of them. And the circuit will be the first row. So the first row and the second row, which is making the silicone and the circuits, will have the universal press inside. Then we label the EnderCell and the barrel. And just like that, starts to work. All right, so now it's done with the calculation processors, and you can see the engineering ones are starting to come out as well. And just to show you, here are the accumulation processors going and being produced with the same setup. Alrighty, once you have those processors, it's time to build our network. And for that, we'll need a few things, starting with a controller from Applied Energistics. So we're going to build this controller. You can see it requires these skystone blocks, which is just smelted skystone. And we're going to make a bunch of these controllers. So if you hold G over the controller, you can see that the maximum size you can have these controllers is a 7x7x7. So you can kind of have it in any shape that you want, as long as it's 7x7x7 or smaller. And the controller can have at most 1 or 2 adjacent blocks in one axis. So you can see you can have it like this inside of a corner, or like this, but if you make a cross, then it doesn't work. It'll turn red. So to demonstrate, you can make any kind of shape that you want. Let's put some power on it so you can see how it works. So right now this is powered and it's working. But if I do something like that, you can see that it turns red because we broke that rule. But other than that, you can have it in kind of whatever funky shape you want. You can go like that. And if we go, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 is fine. As soon as I place the 8th block, the whole thing stops working. Okay, so you can do something like that. And then like this is a valid controller multi-block. We are going to set it up in a 5x5 over here that I have marked out. Okay, and then once you have whatever setup, you can even start with just one. Just one controller is totally valid, but you're very quickly going to want to make a larger structure so you can pull more channels from it. And we'll talk about channels in just a second. So once you have your controller set up, you're going to give it some kind of power. I'm just using an Ender gate back here. You can feed it directly into it, and you can see that it turns on, and now it is ready to go. So let's see how we store items inside of the controller. We will need these ME drives, and to make the dust, you have to put a normal Certus quartz inside of the Inscriber and it'll get the dust, but this is all the mods 10, and we can also do that inside of a mechanism crusher. So let's grab some of that, and I have a crusher over here, and we can dump it in, and this just works faster. Okay, so now that we have a drive, we have to connect it to our controller. We can set it directly on the controller face, and you can see that the device is now online. And if we take a look in our controller, this ME drive is showing up over here. But this isn't really a great way of doing it because of a thing called channels. So basically, almost every device from Applied Energistics uses a thing called channels, and each face of the ME controller can supply 32 channels. So this face you can pull 32 channels from here, 32 channels from here, 32 channels from here. So when we put this ME drive directly against the controller, we are using one of those channels, one of the 32 available channels on that face, and the other 31 are lost because we can't access that anymore. But if we place it one block further away and use a cable, now this Fluix cable can carry 8 channels. So with just this one cable, we can power 8 different machines, and machines themselves from Applied Energistics can pass up to 8 channels in between them. If you want to access the full 32 channels, then you will need to use a dense cable. And these dense cables can pull 32 channels. These Flux cables are fine, but they don't really show any information. So let's use a better cable like the Smart cable. And you can see it says 1 of 8 channels. And we can also use this dense cable, and you can see that it's using 0 of 32 channels because we only have one device and it's going here. So these smart cables can show you how your channels are going through the cables. And like I mentioned before, the devices themselves can carry through 8 channels in between them. So you can see here we have 1, and we're using 1 channel of those 8. And if I put another drive touching to this one, you can see that now it's 2 channels, and both of those are registered. So we can go up to 8. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can see all of these are online and all 8 are showing up. And now this cable is fully saturated with channels. And if we try to put another one, it says it's missing a channel and this will not work. Even if we upgrade this guy to a dense cable, so you can see that it's using 8 channels out of 32. And even though this can hold 32 channels, this drive is still missing a channel because devices can only pass 8 channels in between each one. If you wanted to add more drives, then you can add another cable and put this drive here, for example. And now all of these guys are online. And you can see between this cable and this cable, if you look over here, 9 channels are being passed through. And all 9 of the drives are showing up. Okay, so let's talk about storage. There's a few different ways you can handle storage with Applied Energistics. The main way is by using cells. And you have these item storage cells and fluid storage cells. So you can store fluids and items inside of there. And you can see that it has bytes and types. A lot of people get frustrated with types in Applied Energistics, but the reason why types exist is so you don't accidentally corrupt your world. If you try to store too much MBT data inside of a cell. So it's just kind of a safety thing. And the way it works is each type of item that you use takes up 1/128th of the bytes of the cell, and then the rest of the bytes can be used to store more of that item. What that means is the more types of items you have in your cell, the less of each total thing you can have. So if you take a look at the guide, if you have a 1K item storage cell that you're only storing one type of item in there, let's say it's cobblestone, you can store 8,128 cobblestones inside of that 1K storage cell. But if you have 63 different types of items, you can only have 4,160 of each different item type. Here is a chart that shows the breakdown of bytes and types for a bunch of different cells, so feel free to pause and look it over. Right, so here I have a 1K item storage cell that we can put in there, and right now we have no way of accessing that, so we're going to have to make a terminal to be able to interface with it. And you can see there are 4 different types of terminals. The one we want right now is the ME crafting terminal. And once you have the crafting terminal, you just use a pipe that you can put, or a cable that you can put that on. And then once we access this, you can see a crafting table and all the items that are in your storage. Right now we have no items because this drive is empty. But if we take some cobblestone, for example, and we throw that in there, you can see the cobblestone shows up. We are using 1 type and 16 bytes total from this one item cell. And we can take that cobblestone and craft things with it, like a furnace. Another way you can store things with Applied Energistics instead of on disks is just through chests and other things that store items. And you can do that by using a storage bus. So let's make one of those and grab a chest. And we can put this chest here, put the storage bus on the chest, and then we connect this guy to it, and you can see your storage bus shows up here and it's using one channel. And now whatever we put, so right now in our system, we only have cobblestone, but if I put the Flux cable inside of this chest, you can see that it shows up here as well. So if you already have things like a functional storage drawer, wall, or whatever, you can just connect this storage bus on the controller for that, and all of those items from your functional drawers will be accessible inside of your ME system. And with just these couple of steps, you are basically up and running with Applied Energistics. You just need a controller, a way to access things through a terminal, and then you need a drive, either drives or a storage bus or a combination of the two. It doesn't really matter. So that will kind of get you going. You can store everything in here, have a terminal you can craft from, and it's super convenient. But this is pretty much where Applied Energistics begins, because then we'll get into autocrafting and all that, which I will also talk about in this episode. But before we do that, you notice that I can access my items that are currently set up in my storage lectern from Ars Nouveau wirelessly. And there's no reason for me to switch to Applied Energistics if I can't access this wirelessly either. So let's go ahead and set up some wireless access so we can access our network from wherever we are in our world. We are going to do that by using an ME wireless access point. So you can just craft one of these things. And this goes anywhere on your network. I'm going to just plop it down over here, but you can set it on top of a cable anywhere too. And now we have wireless access up to 16 blocks. And we need to make a wireless crafting terminal. And you will notice that this requires power. So figure out a way to power yourself. I have a player transmitter from Powa powering me. And when you hover over this, when you first make it, you can see that it is unlinked. So we go ahead and go to our wireless access point, shift click it into this slot over here. And now it is linked. And when we open this, we can access our items wirelessly. You can set a keybind for this and put it in your curio slots, and you can use that keybind to open up your terminal. But you will notice if we go more than 16 blocks away, you can see that it says it is out of range. And you can extend the range on the wireless access point by putting in these boosters. So now you can see that the range is 24 blocks. And if I take them out, they each add a little bit more. But that's still not good enough for us in Applied in Alamots 10, and we want full cross-dimensional wireless access, and that is where the dimension card comes into place. So we need 4 infinity range boosters, which means we need 12 wireless boosters. And we already have 4, so let's make 8 more. The normal infinity range boosters will give you infinite range within the same dimension, but if you make the dimension card, it will give you cross-dimensional access to it. So once you have that made, you put it inside of your wireless access point, and now we can access our Applied Energistics system wirelessly from anywhere. So it works here, and if we go to, let's say, the Nether, you can see that we can still access our system. So while we're on the topic of wireless connection to our Applied Energistics system, let's see how we can hook up our little chest storage area here in the mining dimension to our Applied Energistics so we can access all of our items. Because right now we are using the storage lectern and everything we have is in here, and we have absolutely nothing inside of our Applied Energistics system. And rather than transferring all of these guys to drives, we can just hook up a storage bus to this controller, and we will have access to all of these items in our Applied Energistics system. So let's go ahead and take a look how we can have cross-dimensional wireless access to our system, because we obviously can't run cables from a different dimension to this one. The way we do that is by using something called a quantum ring. And this is a multi-block structure set like this that allows you to wirelessly transfer channels from one end to the other. So we will have to set one of these quantum rings up near our controller where we can feed a cable into it to supply it channels. And then on the other end, near our storage, we will have the second quantum ring linked to the first one, and it'll wirelessly transfer, and we can pull the channels from that. All right, so let's set up a quantum ring over here. You just make a 3x3 with the center open with the quantum rings, and then the link chamber goes in the center and the multi-block forms. With this guy, you can put channels inside of it like that, but you can see if I put the cable on the corner, it doesn't connect. So only the sides that looks like it's kind of thicker and it has this like connection to it, you can connect to it. So it's like the plus sign in the middle that you can connect cables to and not the corners. Okay, so now we need to set up the other end near our storage system. Like so. And we can take a storage bus. And some cables and connect that like that. But you can see when I do that, it says that this device is offline. And the reason for that is because even though this one and the other one exist in the world, they're not actually connected together yet, because you can have multiple quantum rings set up, and you need a way to tell them how to connect to each other. And you need a quantum entangled singularity in order to do that. And the way you make this is you need a singularity. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you can make that. So a singularity is made when you take a matter condenser and you pump it full of items. And once it has 256,000 items, it will create one singularity. This does avoid the items. So what we can do is set up the matter condenser over here, and we're going to put in a 64K storage component in there. And right now it's set to just destroy items, but you can either condense it into matter balls or singularities. And that's what we need right now. So now we need to get items into this one, 256,000 different items. And we don't want to waste all of that. So I want to put cobblestone in there because cobblestone is free, basically, with the infinity cobble cell. And we can make this infinity cobble cell to put inside of our drive. This is one of the very first things you should make. And now if you take a look inside of your system, we have 2.1 billion cobblestone. And this is just infinite amounts of it. So then we can take an export bus, which will export things from your network to whatever it's attached to. And we go ahead and put cobblestone, filter it into this one. And now this is going to slowly push items. So you can see 2, 3, 4 is going up, and you will get eventually a singularity. But you can see this is extremely slow. And we don't want to wait that long for a tower. So let's take a look at a better way of doing this. There is a thing from ExtendedAE. So this is an add-on mod to Applied 6. It's not part of the base mod. That is called the void cell. And you can make the void cell. And once you have it made, you can see that inside of it, you can make singularities. So we're going to set it on singularity. And now we just need a way to pump items, the cobblestone, into this void cell, and it'll make us singularities. The way you can really quickly move items from your system is by using an IO port, input output port. And once this is connected to your network, you can see that you can either put stuff from a disk, from a cell, to your system, or the other way around. And acceleration cards will make it a little bit faster. So let's also give it acceleration cards. Now we want to partition this so it doesn't take all the items from our network. We only want cobblestone going into here. And the way you partition things is with a cell workbench. So we'll plop that guy over here, put the cell inside of there, and we want to go ahead and just drag a piece of cobblestone from JI into here. Now this is partitioned to cobblestone, and it'll only accept cobblestone. And we put it inside of our IO port, and we're going to switch this arrow from our cells, from our drive, into this cell. So it'll move things from our system into here, and that is going to start filling this up with singularities. So you can see it only took like 10 seconds maybe, and or maybe even less than that, and we have 2 singularities already. So this is much, much faster. And if you make the extended I/O port from ExtendedAE, which we'll talk about in a bit. This one will work even faster, and you'll get singularities like crazy. Once you have a few inside of the void cell, you're going to need a way to access it. There's two ways to do that. One, you can just flip the arrow in the other direction. And if you have a cell inside of your system, which right now we only have this cobblestone cell, so let's go ahead and make another one. So I have made a 64K item storage cell that we can put in this drive. And now you can see the singularities came into this cell, and we can access it through our terminal. Another way to do it is to just put this void cell inside of your drive. So let's take out these 7. So now we have nothing inside of our system. If we come to our drive and we put the void cell in there, you can see that one singularity is here. So if you want to keep making things, you can leave it in the I/O port and it'll continue to make it. And every once in a while, you just flick the arrow to put it in your drives and then flick it back, and you're going to have singularities in there. Once you have these singularities, you take one, and we need to make a TNT. I'll make a tiny TNT, and you also need an ender dust. So we'll put our tiny TNT here, throw a singularity and the ender dust in there, and we blow them up, and you get a pair of these quantum entangled singularities, which you can place one inside of the first quantum ring. And the next one, we can go ahead and place it at the other end. And you can see, so right now we have access to none of our items. As soon as I put this in there, this kicks on, the storage bus is active, and all of our items are now in our applied energistics, and we can access things wirelessly. And that means we no longer need our storage lectern, so I can go ahead and break that. I do have actually one more storage controller down here that is connected to the automation for all of these guys, all of our functional drawers. So I am going to need a second storage bus. So let's make another one. And with your wireless terminal, there are the wireless terminal settings. If you enable a pick block, you can grab things from your system. So right now I don't have any grass, for example, in my inventory, but if I right middle click on this, it picks up 32 grass blocks. So if I need a smart cable here that I don't have, I can just middle click it, and whatever's in our system, it'll put it in my hotbar. So let's put our second storage bus there and control it. Now you can see this is using 2 channels because each storage bus is using 1 channel. And these 2 channels are going through the quantum ring back to our system over here. And those 2 channels, same 2 channels, are going and connecting to our controller face right there. And the maximum amount of channels you can transfer through a quantum ring is 32. So that pretty much covers the setup and the basics of applied energistics. But before we move on to autocrafting, let's talk about a couple of other things I wanted to mention. Hey, it's me from the future. Don't worry about what's going on behind me. Because this is my survival world, I had to progress a little bit through our episode and then jump back here to talk about some more things over there. But basically, one of the things I'm going to talk about now is from ExtendedAE, and I had to set that up. So I'm just jumping back in time. Anyways, let's briefly talk about cables. Now you already know these glass cables are your basic cables you start with, and then you have the ME covered cable, which is no different than the glass cable other than what it looks like. And then the next step up from that, we have smart cables. And smart cables display the amount of channels that you are using on them. And you can see that any kind of Fluix cable can connect to colored cables, but different colored cables do not connect together. So we have black and red over here, and you can see the black and the red do not mix together. If I put more blue on next to the red, you can see the blue doesn't connect either. But any kind of Fluix cable will connect to any color cable. And when you use things like terminals on a different colored cable, the terminal turns into that color. So it's blue over here. If I put it on the red cable, then it's red. These dense cables can carry a total of 32 channels, but the only problem with them is you cannot put any kind of device, any kind of cable subpart on them, because these dense cables take up the entire block and they will not share the same block space with cable subparts like import buses or flat interfaces. So you can see if I put the interface, I can't connect it in the same block. It's in this block next to it, if you look at the outline for the block. So the only way you can put cable subparts on a dense cable is that you don't. You take a smaller cable and then you can put a cable subpart against the smaller cable. If you have two cables connected somewhere that you didn't want them to connect and you don't want to change the colors, you can use these things called cable anchors. And the cable anchors are very simple. And once you make them, you can put them in between two cables to cut off the connection in between those cables. Something nice cable anchors offer is facades. So you can take any block like this concrete over here, put that in the middle of your crafting grid and surround it with 4 cable anchors, and that will give you these cable facades. The facades can go on any side of a cable and they will hide it, and you can put it on top as well. The nice thing about this is even though it's covered, you can still pull cables through it and it'll look nice and neat. So if you have a hole and your cable is coming from down there, you don't have to leave an ugly hole open. It can look something like this rather than like that. The way you make these colored cables, you can just craft them, but you can also use the color applicator to change the colors on them when they're like placed in the world. And the way you do that is you need to have dyes inside of your color applicator. So you can come to a thing like the ME chest and put your color applicator inside, and you can see it shows up just like a cell in the front. And then you access the top and you can put different colored dyes inside of them. I'm also putting in Snowball because Snowball converts the color back to the Fluix color. So once you have some dyes inside of the color applicator, you can take it back out. And if I hover over it, now you can see 6 types are used. Those are the 6 different dyes, and I'm using 236 bytes. So it does have a limited amount of storage. And with this thing, you can middle click to block pick the color. So if I wanted red, instead of shifting and scrolling through all of these colors until I find red, you can just middle click and it'll pick block it. And then you can right click to apply that color. So if I wanted blue, I middle click on the blue and then I can apply the color. If you want to go back to Fluix, that's where the snowballs come in. So when you use the snowballs, you can turn the cable back into the Fluix variant. Next, let's talk about some terminal settings, or wireless terminal settings specifically. You can see I have enable pick block enabled. And what that means is if I'm looking at this concrete block from Immersive Engineering and I have no concrete blocks in my inventory, if I have them in my ME system and middle click, it's going to put that into my hand for me. So this is very convenient if you're building or doing whatever. And let's say I need some cobblestone, I can just middle click and then now I have cobblestone. If you turn on restock, the restock will allow you access to your entire stack of blocks available in your ME system from your hotbar. So when I turn that on, you can see I have 559 concrete blocks and 2 billion cobblestone. So whatever amount of cobblestone, because we have the infinity cell, so like right now I have infinite amounts of cobblestone, I could just spam these guys in the world and it'll never run out of my hotbar. All right, let's take a look at this magnet card. Actually, I'm going to turn off restock. So AE2 WT lib comes out with this magnet card. And when I put it in there, you can see this magnet filter comes up. But first, we can enable magnet, and that does exactly what it says it does. It magnets things into your inventory. This does not pick up experience, so it's only items. But it offers some cool functionality, is because you can also pick up stuff directly to your ME system. So if you have that enabled, and you throw down the cobblestone, it's going to disappear and it goes directly into your system. So let's look at wrench. So I have no Certus quartz wrench in my system. If I throw this one down, when it disappears and we search wrench, it has gone straight to our ME system. If you didn't want everything to go into your system, but some things, you can go ahead and set up filters for that. So if you take a look at the filter slot, you can see the one down here, because this little arrow pointing to it, is for the insertion filter into your AE2 system. This one is the pickup filter into your inventory. Up here, it's a tiny little arrow pointing. That means we can filter, let's say, cobblestone to be on whitelist, to be on allow. So it's going to allow cobblestone to get inserted into our system, and everything else will go into our inventory. So now when I throw down cobblestone and concrete, the concrete comes to my inventory, the cobblestone goes into our AE2 system. Okay, up next, let's go ahead and talk about the import and export cards. These are upgrades you can add to your wireless terminal to be able to basically automatically import and export things from your system into your inventory. So let's go ahead and put those guys in our wireless terminal. And now let's take a look at the export card. The export card has 18 different slots for 18 different items. And then let's say for slot number 1, we assign it cobblestone. Cha-ching. Now, any inventory slot we assign as the number 1, it's going to output cobblestone to it. So let's say these two we want to be number 1. If we do 2, if we do 2 and insert cobblestone back to number 1, you can see it doesn't do it because it has to be filtered on number 2. You can add acceleration cards. So one acceleration card will do a stack at a time. So when you look into your export card settings and put the acceleration card, now when I pick it up, you can see that the stack appears instantly. So here we have a tank, and let's say I want to export water inside of this tank. I can set up my export card to hold water, so I can look at water in JEI and then drag and drop for slot number 1, and I'm going to assign this as slot number 1. So now if I put the tank over here, you can see it fills up with water. Ain't that cool? You can also, if you have like a bucket of a different fluid that you don't want to drag from JEI, you can also just right click to set a filter. So when you're holding a bucket or something, you can see that it says left click for the basic fluid tank and right click for water, which is what's stored inside of it. This is a standard feature between most things in applied energistics. So whether you're putting power inside of an interface or whatever, you'll be able to do the same thing. Okay, so we have that set up to fill, oops, I got rid of the water. We have this slot set to fill water. Let's go ahead and look at our import card. And let's say we want this one to be import, and we can whitelist the water. So that means it's going to pull water into our system now. So I can put it here to empty it and put it here to fill it back up. This is particularly useful for some things like the time one, where every time you use it uses time fluid. You can have it, if you have time fluid in your system, you can have it automatically export to all of the slots inside of your hotbar. So whenever you have it in your hotbar, it'll automatically get filled up and you don't have to do it manually. Now let's talk about wireless connectors from ExtendedAE. Basically, wireless connectors are another form of cable that connects to each other wirelessly. So I have a wireless connector here and another one there, and I can link these two together using the setup kit. You shift right click to clear the settings, and then you right click on one of the wireless connectors, and then right click on the other one. And now it says device online, and those two are connected together. It doesn't matter which one you click on first or whatever. It's either order works. Now you can see that this doesn't actually use any channels. So it's 0 out of 32 channels because that's the same exact logic as cables. If I add more cables here, that doesn't add any more channels because it's a cable. That would be silly. So imagine this is a cable also. But from this end, I can now pull those channels out that are coming from our controller. And see now it's using one channel to power this one drive. And if we go back over here, you can see that that one channel shows up on this cable. If I add more devices on this end, then those channels flow through into here. So imagine this is pretty much another cable, but the link between them is just wireless. You can also color wireless connectors. So this one is a Fluix one, and that's why it's connecting to the blue one. But if I change it to a purple, let's do red. So if I shift right click to change it to a red one, you can see that the blue cable disconnects from it. I can shift this back to Fluix, and the Fluix will connect to any colored cable. Or if, like, let's say you want this to be blue, you can change, if it's white, see it doesn't connect, but you can change this cable to Fluix, and the Fluix cable will connect to it also. Same logic as cables. The one thing you want to watch out for with wireless connectors, let's say I have this set up here and I want to set up multiple wireless connectors together. And those are like out here in the world being connected to different devices. Let's say that this one is using 6 channels, and then this one's using 2, and this one's using 1, and this one's using 5, and whatever. If the sum of all of the channels used by here going through these cables is less than 32, then everything is okay. But let's say you add more devices down there and it bumps up this number above 32, then some of your devices over there will lose channels because each wireless connector can carry 32 channels. And if you add devices over there, it can cause another device to lose a channel because it can't transport it all on this cable. To fix that, you can use P2P tunnels, which we'll talk about in just a bit. Or you can just use different colored cables. So you can set up like the cables along all of these faces and use your connector. So this one will be blue, like that. The next one we can do purple, like that. We can do red, yellow, and white. So now all of these wireless connectors have their own dedicated dense cable connecting to your controller, and you can saturate them all with 32 channels. The next thing I want to quickly talk about are these amazing cells added by MegaCells, and those are the bulk item storage cells. As the name suggests, this is bulk storage for one single type of item. So you can see when you put it inside of your cell workbench, it only has one slot. And because it can only hold one item, you have to partition it before you can use it. So I want to store iron in here. So I'm going to drag iron ingots here to partition it. And now what we can do is put that in our IO port, flip the arrow to pull items out of our system into the cell. And it's going to pull all of the iron, 734,000 iron from our system into the cell. So now we can put this in our drive and we have access to all of that iron. But this actually does something cooler, is that it has a spot for a compression card upgrade. And when you put the compression card upgrade in there, it compresses your whatever block is in here up as much as it can. So now when we put the same thing down in there and look for iron, you can see that it compressed our iron up to 3x, 4x, and 5x blocks. But you can tell that we don't have any of the other blocks, which is kind of a bummer. Like, what happens if I try to like craft this down and then put it in there? It's just going to get crafted back up again. So because it's going to get compressed. The way you solve that problem is you need to basically have a decompression module for your cells to work properly. So you put the decompression module in here, and this will also allow you to compress things back down. So now when we look at iron, you see all the different varieties of iron, including iron ingots and nuggets. And because it's an even amount and we don't actually have any iron ingots left over, if I click on it, it brings up the Autocrafting menu. But if that ever happens, you can just shift click and you can grab a stack of iron. Same thing with nuggets. I can shift click and grab a stack of nuggets. If you do have like 2 iron in here and you try to pick that up, it's going to give you a full stack. So you only have to shift if you have none, because it defaults to the crafting menu. But I don't have to have any patterns to compress or decompress these guys. The system will just handle it automatically, and it works completely seamlessly with your autocrafting setup. Once you have autocrafting set up. The only bummer about these bulk storage cells is if you take a look at iron, it doesn't show you anywhere how much iron ingots you have stored. The only way you can tell is by coming to the drive and hovering over that specific bulk item storage cell, and then you can see how many items are stored inside of it. I hope that this gets changed in the future, because it would be nice to see how many things you have stored in there, but for now, it doesn't do that. If you are going to use bulk storage cells, don't forget your decompression module. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time. Something important to note in your system is, let's say we grab this void cell that was making our singularities, and I put that in here to start making singularities. You can see my system runs out of power and it starts flickering. That's because anytime you're moving items from Applied Energistics, if you're importing or exporting a ton of items, then your system is going to use up all of the power, and then it pulses like this. And if you're looking into your recipe, it's very annoying because it keeps going out of power like this and you can't like use it It's kind of breaks the system. The way you fix this is by, well, first of all, let's turn that off, is by using energy cells. And these ones are the super dense ones from mega cells, but just use any energy cell that you have. And you put this anywhere along your network. It doesn't have to be right here. They don't require channels, so you can just put a cable down like here and then connect a million of them to that cable. It doesn't matter. Now, when I put these down, that gives us, each one of these is giving us a 25.6 million FE storage. So times 9 plus all of the power inside of our controllers, that's giving us a total of 231 million FE stored in our system. So now that I have all of that FE stored in there, if I go ahead and flick this again to make singularities, you can see now our system is no longer flickering because we have a little bit of a buffer for our power. So you see how it's going down and then all of a sudden it gets filled back up with power. But now it's not running out because we have such a big buffer. So this is an essential part of setting up your ME system. Make sure you have some energy cells in there to give yourself a buffer. If you're ever working with Fluix cables or having some kind of issue within your network and you want to see more information, you can make this network analyzer and shift right click on the controller, and that will show you kind of what's happening. Right now it's on full mode, so it's showing everything. And if you look at it, you can see normal link, dense link, P2P link, normal node, dense node, and offline node. So what that means is the links are your connections between like your cables, your wireless connectors, all of those stuff. And then the nodes are your devices on there. So we have a normal device over here. That's the blue one. And then we have our links. And you can see both the normal nodes and the links are the same color. But if I change the links, which is our cables, to something like a lighter blue, like that, now you can see that it's showing the cables right there. So even though these Fluix cables don't show the channels, but with the network analyzer, you can see that here in between the two, there's one channel. Here's the second channel, third channel, and you can see all of those channels adding up to 6. If I add more of these guys and look back at it, you can see this one is missing a channel. So it's a quick way to identify what's not powered. And you can see that this is fully utilized with 8 channels, so that can kind of help you troubleshoot things. We also have a device called the network tool, and this basically stores cards inside of it. So you can keep acceleration cards in here and they won't be in your normal inventory. When you access something like an import bus and you have that in your inventory, these will be available and you can add them to the import bus, for example. They also work as a wrench, so you can pick things up without having to break them, but they do not rotate blocks. So those two features are kind of not very useful about the network tool. They're really the only reason you might want to use it is because it reveals facades. So if you have facades all around your base, like in here, I have facades somewhere in the ceiling and I can't see them. But if I switch to the network tool, it hides all of the facades, so you can see exactly where your cables are going and you can access it that way. The problem and the most frustrating thing about this stupid device is every time you're looking at an Applied Energistics block or interface, GUI, it shows this up, which is where it's storing the cards. That means it's accessing the network tool anytime you're looking at an Applied Energistics thing. So there's no way you can put this, because once you're accessing it, you can't move it from your inventory, just like a backpack. If you open up a backpack, you can't move the backpack. So I can't shift click it. I can't put it in my system. If I even go to my terminal, there's no way to put it in it. The only two things you can do is trash the stupid thing, which is what I always do, or you can make a chest and you can put a chest on an import bus and you can put the network tool in there and the chest will import it into your system. But because I hate this thing, I'm going to trash it. We also have portable cells. So you can take a look at this one. Portable cells require power to work. So I have my player transmitter charging it. And you can see it has types and bytes that we can do. And this is essentially like a backpack. So we can access it and it has a storage inside and we can put our items in there and that'll go do whatever we want. You can see that those two things are in there. It's using 2 types and 17 bytes. And I can take those things back out. Essentially a portable backpack. Let's talk about 2 more cards, and those are the equal distribution and overflow destruction card. Let's say we have a cell over here that we partition with cobblestone and oak logs. And I go ahead and pull as many cobblestones and oak logs from my system as I can. Really quickly, you see that this cell fills up with cobblestone and there's no more room inside of it for any other thing that we might have partitioned. That's an undesirable outcome in some cases, because if now I wanted to also store wood inside of this cell, I can't, because you have no more available bytes for it. The way you can fix that, or the way you can control that, is by putting an equal distribution card in there. And now this is going to divide the remaining available bytes between the cobblestone and the oak log to make sure it leaves some room between it. So if I do the same thing now and put it in the IO port, you can see it fills up half of it with oak logs and the other half with cobblestone. So the equal distribution card equally distributes the bytes to all of the types of items that you have available, that you have partitioned in the cell. So that way, even if one of them fills up, it'll have enough bytes available for something else to go in there. The overflow destruction card does exactly what it sounds like it does. If you have this inside of there, you know how it held 4,000 oak and 4,000 cobblestone? Any more cobblestone or oak we try to put into this cell, it's just going to get voided. I'm not going to demonstrate that because I don't want to destroy all of my oak logs, but just take my word for it. Let's talk about subnets. Basically, a subnet in Applied Energistics is any kind of network that you set up to support your main setup. So in this example, I have a controller, and this is our network. And this controller is hooked up to an ME drive that has an infinity cobblestone cell and then a 1K item storage cell. So if we look in here, we have an infinite amount of cobblestone and then also access to another storage cell that can store items. And let's say I want to just output that cobblestone inside of this furnace and smelt it into stone and then pull that back into it. The way I could do that is by using an import bus and an export bus. And we put the export bus on the furnace and then the import bus on top, like so. And if you take a look at this furnace, it uses power, and it's going to get input from the left side and it's going to output to the top side. So this import bus, the export bus, is going to export the cobblestone from our infinity cell into here. That's going to get smelted into stone, and the stone is going to be pulled by the import bus back to our system. Okay, so if I filter this as cobblestone, it's going to start pulling the cobblestone, smelting, and going back through. Now, when I look at this cable, I'm using 3 channels, as you might expect. Here's one device, there's a second and the third device. So this guy is using 3 channels, 2 extra channels on this cable just to power this furnace. Now imagine if you have multiple furnaces set up to do something like this, very quickly you're going to use through all of your channels. So you can do something in this case is to subnet. And basically what that means is you can use a quartz fiber to block the connection between your main network and the subnetwork. So through the quartz fiber, power can flow through. So the power that's stored inside of our controller here is flowing through and powering this export and import bus. You can see both devices are online, but if you take a look, no more cobblestone is going in here. That's because even though they're powered, it's physically disconnected from our main controller here. If I look through here, you can see the quartz fiber, but you don't see any of the import or export buses. If I remove the quartz fiber, the import and export bus appears back over here. So just by putting down this quartz fiber in between here, I'm splitting up this cable into a subnetwork down here. And that one channel is going to our drive, but you can see this cable only has 1 channel and this one has 2. Something important to note, every time you have a subnetwork without a controller, the channels exist through every single cable. So if I pull this cable out here, even though there's nothing connected to this, it's still using 2 channels. That's because there is no controller for our channels to terminate to. So it just exists through everything. And because we can't hook up a dense cable to a cable subpart, like an import bus, you see how it doesn't connect to here. If I put it, it goes on the block above. That's because these dense cables take up the entire block, and there's not enough room for it to share space with the import bus. So you have to use a smaller cable to do that, which means if you have a subnetwork without a controller, you can at most have 8 devices on it before you need to add a controller to manage those channels. So as soon as I put the controller down, you can see now this cable has 0 channels being used because the channels now go and get terminated to the controller. And we don't have an issue with our network breaking down if we did like this, because it's actually not connected. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate that is by using red cables. So now our subnetwork is all of this red cable, and our main controller is all of the blue cables. And if we take a look at this controller, you will be able to see the import and export bus and the quartz fiber. So there's the import and export bus. And if we take a look in here, you can see the crafting terminal, the drive, and the quartz fiber and the blue cables. So everything connected on the blue cables is part of our main network. Everything connected to the red cables is our subnetwork. So this is now a subnetwork, but you can see it's not actually working because there's no more cobblestone coming in and the stone isn't going anywhere. Well, there is no connection between these 2 networks right now, except for the power. So we're getting power from this controller, but nothing else. So there's nowhere for these cobblestone. There's nowhere that this cobblestone can come from because this has no idea this drive exists. And there's no way for this stone to go to because there's no storage for it to go to. So something else we could do is, let's say we can grab a chest and put a storage bus on it. Now with that storage bus connected, you can see the stone will start to get put into here because now that chest, that storage bus is part of this network. And it can be, and then we can access the same chest with a different, with this network and use an import bus again. And that import bus is going to take this stone out. And that stone is going into our cell right there. So if we take a look at here, this can only see that one import bus. And this controller can see the other import bus and the export bus and the storage terminal. That seems kind of silly though. A better way of setting this up is by having the storage bus again, but instead we're going to put down an interface. So this interface will go over here. And then we are going to hook up another storage bus. Or actually, we don't need a storage bus. We're just going to hook up a blue cable to this interface. So now this network is seeing the interface, but this network cannot see the interface. It only sees the storage bus. So we can filter cobblestone to over here and set it to 64, for example. So that cobblestone is coming from our main network being stocked inside of here. And then because there's that storage bus on here, it's also part of our subnetwork. So this is inputting the cobblestone. You see that number is going up. And then the stone isn't there either because the stone is being put into here. So if we can't come and look at our controller, you can see the number of the stone should be going up. There's 50 and 51. The reason why you might want to use a setup like this is so you can set up a bunch of furnaces down. So if we had 8 furnaces down here and each of them require 2 devices on them, so that's going to be 16 channels for those plus 1 for the storage bus. We're going to be using 17 channels. So we would be utilizing 17 channels from our controller, but when we subnet that, we're using those 17 channels from this controller And our main controller still only uses 2 channels, one for the drive and one for the interface. And that means you can set up multiple subnets. So we can have the furnaces here and another subnet over there, another subnet over there, and we'll have enough channels from our main controller to go around to power all of the devices. So just to demonstrate that, let's continue this cable on. And if you look at the blue one, it's still using 2 channels, right? But I can add another import bus, let's say over here, and another one, oops, not there. Another one here and here. So now we have 3 more furnaces, pretend, that we're using. So all of those channels are flowing into this controller, but this one still only uses 2 channels. So we can expand this with up to 32 devices from each face of this controller. So with just one controller on a subnetwork, we can power 192 devices and not at all affect the number of channels we're using from our main controller. So that's one reason why you might want to use subnets. Another reason, then that reason being to save on the channels from your main controller. Another reason why you might want to use a subnetwork is to limit the items that are accessible to your main network from your main network to do something like filtering, for example, right? So let's say we have an annihilation plane, and we are going to continue this cable by putting a quartz fiber down. And let's use the red one again. Oops. So here we have our annihilation plane. That's all 9. And there's no configuration for this guy, right? If I right click on it, nothing happens. And I want this to break something, but I want to be able to filter what it's breaking. Let's say we want it to break cobblestone, but not wood. If I don't have this, if I have this linked up like that, you can see it breaks the cobblestone and it breaks the stone, and those are going into our cell over here. But let's say I only want it to break the logs. I can turn this into a subnet. I can put something down like an interface that is connected to our main controller. And we are going to put a storage bus on this one, and we can filter the storage bus to wood. And we will connect this guy over here. So now this storage bus can only accept wood. So if we put, and the only place that whatever, so if this annihilation plane breaks something, it needs to have a place for it to go. And right now, the only place something can go is into the storage bus, and this storage bus will only accept wood. So if I put down stone, you can see that it's no longer breaking the stone. But if I put down wood, it breaks the wood immediately. And the wood goes into here, flowing into our main network. So let's go ahead and remove those over there so you can see. Right now in here, we have no wood at all. When I put down wood, it's broken immediately, and it goes into our system over here because it goes to the storage bus that's filtering the oak log into this interface. And then anything that goes into the return inventory of the interface goes into our network, onto our drives. This could be useful for a setup like, let's say, using the budding crystals to grow quartz. You only want this to break the fully grown crystal that gets Certus quartz, right? So if we filter this storage bus to Certus quartz, where are you? Right there, Certus quartz crystal. And let's speed this guy up by using some growth accelerators. And you can power these however you want. I mean, we could even use these guys. Okay, so you can see now that is growing, but if you break the bud, it's going to give you, oops, I had silk touch. If you break the bud, it's going to give you the dust, not Certus quartz. So this doesn't break the bud itself. It waits until it's grown into a full crystal. So now it's large. And once it's a full crystal, you can see that it mines it, and we get Certus quartz over here. If we don't have this as subnetted, and we connect connected up to our main network, it's going to break anything that it sees in front of it, including the not fully matured buds. So you can see it broke that, and now we're getting the dust instead of the quartz crystal. So you can use a subnet in this case to limit the output for the annihilation plane, and it'll only be able to mine the one thing that exists in there. So you can kind of set up how you do these Certus quartz, the budding Certus quartz blocks to automate Certus. So those are the two main reasons why you might want to subnet something, either to save channels from your main network or to limit connections between your controller and your subnet, so you can filter things like the annihilation plane or do another setup. If you wanted to see more examples, you can press G to go to your thing and look at subnet. And then you can see an example of a bunch of different setups. So here they're using the charger to automate it and all kinds of things. And I'd recommend looking through the Applied Energistics guide. Anyways, it's really full of a ton of information. It'll explain everything about the mod, but I know it's helpful to see an example of it in person in the videos, which is why I'm doing this. And just to reiterate how this is a subnetwork, these channels from the red cable are not connecting with the blue cable. If we look at our network here, we don't see the red cable, we don't see the annihilation plane, we don't see the growth crystals. If we put down another controller here and look at it, we don't see any of the blue stuff. So now we see the growth accelerators, the annihilation plane, and the storage bus. So these quartz fibers block the connection of channels between the two networks, but they allow power to pass through. So everything in here is being powered from the power from our main controller because the quartz fiber allows power to flow through. You could achieve the same exact thing by powering this controller and removing the quartz fiber completely to have no connection at all between the two networks. This still does the exact same thing, but you're just inputting power from this controller rather than a controller. And you're required to have a controller. If I remove this, you can see everything goes offline because now it's not getting power from anywhere. And instead of using a controller, you could also do an energy acceptor. But when you do an energy acceptor, do remember that because you don't have a controller to manage your channels being used are going to be everywhere on these cables. So even though these guys don't use any channels, the two channels are still present here. That means at most you can have 8 devices on this subnetwork if you don't use a controller. Anyways, I don't want to ramble on forever, but that's pretty much the gist of subnets. The complicated part about subnets is the actual thinking about your setup and how to do it, and that just comes with practice. The time has come to talk about P2P tunnels. I feel like a lot of people overcomplicate P2P tunnels, and hopefully I will do a good job of keeping it simple while also being extremely thorough and giving you all the information that you'll possibly need to deal with P2P tunnels. So the way I want you to think about P2P tunnels is exactly how the name suggests, a peer-to-peer tunnel. So imagine this is a tunnel, and we're going to have something flowing into the tunnel, and it's going to flow outside on the other end of the tunnel. It's going to come out. So let's imagine that there's a train, and in this case, I'm going to be using redstone to demonstrate. So let's say there's a train of redstone signal that goes into our P2P tunnel, and while it's in the P2P tunnel, we can't see the train, right? So when a train goes into the tunnel, it disappears. We can't see it until it comes out the other end, like so. Now, you might see that this is an ME P2P tunnel, but we need to change it to a redstone P2P tunnel for it to work, and you simply do that by right-clicking on it with a piece of redstone. And you can see that that redstone connects, and we can put down a lever over here, and we can use that to signal the power. I am playing all the mods 10, and if you search P2P in JEI, you can see that there's a whole different bunch of types of P2P tunnels, like redstone and items and fluids and energy. And so P2Ps can transport a lot of different types of things. And when you look at the recipe in JEI, you can see what you right click on the P2P tunnel to get to convert it into that type of P2P. Anyways, you may have noticed when I turned on this lever, nothing happened to this. That is because these are devices from Applied Energistics, and just like any other devices in Applied Energistics, they require power and channels to operate. So we need to power these and provide them with channels, and we can create a little subnetwork by even just using an energy acceptor. So I'm going to put an energy acceptor here and power it, and you can see when I do that, these guys kick on, and if you look at the cable, there's two channels being used, one by this P2P tunnel and the other one by this one. And if we turn on this lever, you can see it still doesn't go through, and that's because this is unlinked. The way you link P2P tunnels together is by using a memory card. Shift right click on your P2P tunnel to assign it a frequency. In this case, it created a new frequency. That is 3E81. And then we go to our other P2P tunnel and we right click to load that configuration, that frequency into that one. So now these guys are powered and they are linked together. And when I turn on the lever, you can see that the redstone flows through. So again, imagine this is a tunnel. There's a train of redstone that comes in and it goes into the tunnel. We don't see the train while it's going through this cable until it comes back out on this end. Something important to note about P2P tunnels is that they are directional. So if we look at this one, it says it's the input side, and this one is the output side. So if we set this lever on the output side and turn it on, you can see that in the reverse direction, the redstone does not flow. So be careful with the inputs and the outputs. The one where you shift right click to assign the frequency is going to be your input. And then when you right click to assign it and down the line, that's going to be your output. You can only have one input, but you can have multiple outputs for P2P tunnels. So when you place it here and right click, you can notice that when you load the configuration, it changes to the appropriate type of P2P tunnel. So we do that with both of these and put down more redstone. And when I turn this on, you can see they all turn on. We can also use P2P tunnels to move items around. So let's say over here, I want to turn this P2P into an item P2P. I can right click it with a hopper or a chest. Same with this one. And now we can put a hopper to hopper some cobblestone in there. And when I put a chest over here, you can see this chest is being filled up with the cobblestone from this hopper. So it could do items, it could do fluids or whatever. The P2P tunnels themselves can't push or pull. So you need to use something else to do that. And because this is a direct link to this one, it's almost as if this hopper is directly connected to this chest over here. So it's the hopper itself that's pushing into the chest. If I set another chest over here, and put cobblestone in it, nothing is going to happen because this chest cannot push items into this chest. Chests don't do that. So we're back to this configuration with the redstone. Now, if we take a look at this smart cable and look at the channels on it, you might see something strange happening. Each section of the cable that we look at, there are 4 channels being used on this cable. The reason why that is happening is because we don't have a ME controller right now to manage all of these channels. So because this is a subnet, these channels exist through the whole network because there's nowhere for them to go and get terminated to. That means we can only at most have 8 P2P tunnels on a subnet, or 8 of any device really. So if I add that one, you can see that goes up to 5, 6, 7, 8. And now this smart cable is fully saturated with 8 channels. If I put the 9th P2P tunnel or the 9th device down, the whole system shuts down. This behavior is a little bit different than what you're probably used to, is because if you ever have a setup with Applied Energistics, like let's make a little mock setup. So we have a controller over here, and we pull cables from it. And we can put P2P tunnels along the cable. In this example, you can see that this device is missing a channel because we have one cable that can hold 8 devices, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 devices. So these two, this one and this one, are offline, but the rest of them still work. But in this case, as soon as we have more than one device on this network, the whole thing shuts down. The reason for that is because, again, we don't have a controller to manage those cables. So in this example, those channels exist everywhere inside of the subnet because they don't have a place to go to into the controller. Whereas in this example, if you look at this last one where it has 3 things connected to it, well, let's remove this one. And we have 2 P2P tunnels connected. So this part of the cable is only using 2 channels. And then it gets merged with these 2 for 4, 6, 7, 8. So over here, we're using 8 channels, but over here, it's only 1 because the channels flow. So it's flowing from our controller, and one of them is going to this one. The second one is going here. The third one is going here. The fourth one, so on and so forth. So if you look at the cable down here, the channel for this one doesn't go all the way down to here because that's silly. So it just flows directly from the controller to the device. But that's not the case here because we don't have a controller, so these channels just exist everywhere. This means that in any time we want to set up a subnet that uses more than 8 devices, then we have to have a controller. And we can do that by just plopping down a controller somewhere. Let's say, how about over here? Okay. So now this controller is getting power from the energy acceptor, but you can see all of the channels are flowing to this controller. And over here, it's only using 1 channel. And if I remove it, the whole thing lights up. Now, what about dense cables? You might be saying, hey, what about dense cables? Can we have dense cables and then connect 32 things? Because this can support 32 devices. Yes and no. For things that can connect to dense cables, like this ME drive, you can see that it comes online and we can have 32 ME drives on this subnetwork without a controller. The problem is devices like P2P tunnels need to be within the same block as the cable that they are connected to. And dense cables use the entire area of the block. So you can never put anything inside of the dense cable. Like if I get an import bus, for example, this import bus cannot connect to this dense cable. So any cable subpart, like an import bus, a storage bus, a P2P tunnel, those need to be connected to small cables. So you can take an offshoot of a small cable and connect it in there. And they can go all the way around like that. So you can have 5 devices plus the cable coming in one block area. But if you have a dense cable, you can't put any cable subparts in there. And if you noticed in that case where our channels exist through the whole subnet, if you don't have a controller, even though this can support 32 channels, this that is required to connect to a P2P tunnel can only support 8. So if I put down 8 devices, this is completely utilized, even though it's only connected to this P2P tunnel. And if I put another device, it shuts down. And that's because in a subnet where you don't have a controller to manage your channels, the channels exist through the whole thing. And that means anytime you have a network where you're going to be using more than 8 devices on it, 8 cable subparts, you're going to have a controller to manage those channels. So I've simplified our setup back down to these 3 P2P tunnels, and let's talk about the most used case for P2P tunnels, which it's not redstone, it's transferring channels. So instead of our train being redstone, we're going to be using channels from the ME P2P tunnel. And we can convert this back to an ME P2P tunnel just by right-clicking it with a piece of cable. And let's remove these guys. So in this case, we want our train to be channels. So let's set down a controller over here that we can pull channels from. So here's a controller. We're going to power it. And let's use a dense cable. And in this case, I'm going to be using red just to signify that it is connected to this controller. So our red cable, dense cable, is able to pull 32 channels from this face of the controller, and that goes into this tunnel, this P2P tunnel. And then we don't see the train while it's moving through, and that train, when it comes back out on this end, then we can see it again. So if we have a device here, you can see now it's up to one channel. So that one channel is flowing through this red cable. It goes into the tunnel. We have no access to that red cable in here until it comes back out over here to this device. So you can see there's one channel over there. If we look at this cable over here, which is the subnet for the P2P tunnels, it's still 3 channels being used over here. So these channels are the ones that are connecting and providing power from our energy acceptor to 1, 2, 3, these 3 devices. And this channel, that's the train coming from our controller, doesn't exist over here. It has no effect on these cables until it comes back out on this end into this drive. So if I look at this controller, you can see the only thing that's visible to this controller is the drive and the A to red cables. And if I change this one to a controller so we can see what's going on, and we look in here, you don't see the drive in here. You see the 3 P2P tunnels and the 9 blue cables, because of these 2 are completely separate. So it's important for you to never cross your P2P tunnels together, or your subnetwork controller, and connect it to your main controller. So this is our main controller right now, which has access to our drives, and this is our subcontroller that's just powering our P2P tunnels. And this is necessary if we want to use more than 8 channels, more than 8 devices for our P2Ps, right? So if I connect these 2 together, you can see that these 2 controllers get hooked up together, and that breaks the controller laws for applied energistics, and the whole system shuts down. But if you wanted to power this controller instead of having a gate on here, if you wanted to power it with that controller, you can subnet it by using a Quartz fiber. And you can have the Quartz fiber go over here, and you can connect that. And you see that it doesn't shut down. And it's the same exact thing where if you look in this controller, it only has access to the P2P tunnels, and this controller has access to the drive. So this Fluix cable, the Quartz fiber, can transport power. So this controller is powering the Fluix cable, and then that power goes to power this device, to power the controller and also the 3 devices, but these channels are not getting mixed up. So if you take a look over here, we're using 3 channels for the 1, 2, 3 devices. And over here from our dense cable, we have just 1 channel flowing in, because that's the 1 channel for our ME drive. If I add more drives over here, so if we put 3 more down, you can see that bumped up to 4. And in this controller, we're seeing the 4 ME drives, but that made no difference to this blue cable, which is connected to this controller, because these channels are not linked together in any way. And the same is true when we remove the Quartz fiber. But if I remove this gate, you can see that this is losing power. If you look at Jade at the top. But if we connect it again like this, that power gets filled back up. But if we don't want to do this connection, then we have to power this network separately. So I can just add a bunch of drives over here. And this is what, 8 drives and 8 more over here. So now if we look over here, we're using 16 channels and we have 16 drives connected to it. And it's flowing into this tunnel, this train of channels. It's flowing into this tunnel. 8 of those train carts are coming out here to power these 8 drives, and the other 8 are coming out of here to power these drives, but you don't see any of those trains on this cable. This cable is only for these 3 devices that you can see on here. You can directly link this network to this one if you don't have a controller. So let's talk about what's going on in this picture. We linked these 2 cables together, and we removed that controller because that controller was giving us an issue where it turned off, right? And that's because you can't have 2 controllers in one network. So we were breaking an applied energistics rule. But this is still working because we're not breaking any rules. And you can see that this device and these 3 devices that are using 3 channels flow from this Fluix cable into the red one, and the trains going into this tunnel, you see how there's 19 devices on there? That's because it's the 16 being used by these guys plus the 3 that are being used. So there's 19 going into here. And now when we look at this controller, now we can see the P2P tunnels because it's directly linked to this network. We can convert this to the same exact setup as when we had an energy acceptor by putting a quartz fiber here. And now these channels that are flowing, see it's back down to 16 because those channels aren't getting mixed up with these ones. So again, we can't see the P2P tunnels because they are subnetted now, and those exist in here. This example is the exact same setup. Functionally, not theoretically, functionally, it's the exact same setup as having it done this way. But in this case, it's your energy acceptor that's powering the device. In the subnet case, it's your controller that's powering the devices. So the power is coming from there rather than here. But in terms of the functionality, it's exactly the same as having the energy acceptor here. So you can see that, you know how if you have a subnet without a controller, those 3 channels exist everywhere in your cable? That's what's happening right now. If we add a controller over here, you can see that changes. And now this cable only is using 1 channel because that 1 channel is flowing from our network controller. And it comes like this and it follows to this device. And then 2 more come out going over here. One of those 2 goes to this device and the other one continues this way. So this one only has 1, but then it merges with this one. And now we have 2. And then this one merges with that one. And we have 3 going into the controller. Generally, when you set up P2P tunnels, you want to be efficient with the way you use your channels. So it's rare that you'll kind of connect it up directly like this, because now we're wasting channels on this cable to power these devices when we can just not do that and set up a controller here to power them. So generally, this is how you're going to want to set up your P2P tunnels, but you have the option to do it the other way if your specific case calls for it. So just to review, we have a main controller over here, and this could be, you know, like a bigger controller. That's a 3x3 or whatever. And we're pulling channels from one face of it. That train of channels is going into our ME P2P tunnel, and then it comes out from wherever it's linked. And again, they are directional, so we can have 1 input and then we can have multiple outputs on the other end. So let's take a look at why you might want to use P2P tunnels instead of just not doing this and just going like that. Because this is still using 16 channels, right? Going into this cable. So what's the purpose of having these in the way? It just seems like complicating it for no reason. And to give you an example of why you might want to do that, I'm going to set up 64 ME drives. So we have 8 towers of 8 ME drives, totaling 64. The reason why they're towers of 8 is because devices in Applied Energistics can only transfer 8 channels between them. So if we put a 9th one up here, then it's not going to be able to receive a channel from the one below because they can only transfer 8. In this case, if you have a controller set up over here, for example, let's give this guy power, and you connect your dense cables like this. You can see that as we're going down, because it merges more and more and more, when we connect all 4 of these guys together, this cable is fully saturated now. Even if we gain access to a second face, so between these 2 cables, these 2 faces, we have access to 64 channels, but we can't transfer those 64 channels across one cable like this, because this cable can only handle 32. So it doesn't matter if this end is touching 800 faces of the controller, it can still only transfer 32 channels. That means if I hook up this guy, now something doesn't work, and you can see 8 ME drives are missing channels. Using P2P tunnels is a way you can fix this situation. And remember, P2P tunnels can't connect to a dense cable, so we're going to have to remove all of these dense cables and use these smaller cables. And we can put our P2Ps on here. Okay, so in this example now, this P2P tunnel, so on this red cable, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, plus this one, 9 devices on this red cable. And if you look at the error, you see how it says too many channels. That's because this is a subnet, so no part of this red cable is connected to our controller here. If we look at this controller, it's touching absolutely nothing. So this controller doesn't even see this P2P tunnel. That means we need to power all of these P2P devices. And again, we're going to do that using a separate controller. That's this guy, and we can power it. So now we have all 9 of those devices that are online touching the red cable that are coming to this controller, and this controller can see all the cables and the P2P tunnels, but this one doesn't see anything. And we're going to be connecting this controller to all of our drives. So let's use our configurator or the memory card, and we shift right click to set a new frequency. And then let's think about this, right? This face of the controller can offer us up to 32 channels. That means we can power 4 of these P2P tunnels with 1, because each one of these are going to need 8 channels for the 8 drives, and 8 times 30 and 8 times 4 is 32. So we can have 4 of these as set as output. Now, when we go back and look at this P2P tunnel, you can see carried channels is 32, and it has 4 outputs. And when we look at this one, it's carrying 8 channels, and this one's carrying 8 channels, and this one's carrying 8 channels. So those 32 channels, the train with 32 channel carts is flowing into that tunnel, and then 8 of those channel carts go out here, 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 and here. And if we look at our dense cable over here, even though we're transferring 32 channels, this is only using 9 because it's just the devices. So we have 9 devices that are connected. This controller doesn't see any of the drives, but this controller will see all 32 drives. But we have 64 drives, and we want to do that. In this case, we're limited by our controller face because our controller face can only provide us with 32 channels. So we need to tap into a different side with another cable. We can configure this one to a new frequency, so you can see the colors are different, and link that up to the last 4. And all of those guys are going to get powered. And if we look at this controller, now all 64 ME drives are powered and they all have channels. So the reason why you might want to use P2P tunnels is so you can keep your cables neatly organized and be a lot more efficient with the way you move channels, because each time you connect to another set of devices, you don't want it to merge up on the cable and then get saturated. Because if you wanted to do this without P2P tunnels, you would have to have two dense cables going from two different faces of the controller to it, which is not a big deal in this example. But imagine we had, you know, another 8 on this side that required you to pull more dense cables, whereas in this case, it'll still fit on this cable because we can have 23 more devices hooked up to this cable, and each one of those 23 devices can carry 32 channels. So let's take a look at another example. So in this case, we have one P2P tunnel carrying 32 channels in it out here, but we can change this to a dense cable. And in this case, it will be the blue one. And we can put these guys over here. Okay, so now all of these guys are powered, and if we look at our controller, we still see, I broke one extra one. Whoops. So let's put those guys back. If we look at this controller, we can still see all 64 ME drives, but now this P2P tunnel is linked directly to this one. So we can remove these guys, and our drives are still okay because it's this one now, instead of having 4 different outputs of 8 channels, it has one output of 32 channels that's powering this entire cable. So if you can imagine, from just one cable like this, you can access multiple faces of your controller over here, and each one can output 32 channels. So you can have 8 times 32 drives set on one cable like this. But if we come over here and we set down, so you see how this is the blue one and this is the red one. So the red one is linked to this controller. So this controller is only seeing red cables, and this controller is only seeing blue cables. If we set down a controller on the blue cables, the whole thing shuts down. So even though these blue ones are not connected to this one, they flow, that channels flow from that tunnel to this tunnel, and it's touching this controller. So that's why that has a problem. The same exact thing would happen in this one, but now this is turning off and that one's working. If I put a controller on both ends, well, this one doesn't work because our P2Ps are offline right now. So let me make a couple more changes to this setup just so you guys can see. I'm going to go ahead and remove these guys. And let's say we have our main controller over here, and it's going to be a 5x5 controller. And we can set down P2P tunnels along all of these faces, like so. And we can put down another controller over here. So this controller is going to be the same as our red one, right? So we have these red cables, and we're going to have to use the small ones to connect to this controller. And then we can pull a dense cable out from the top. Connecting over here. And then somewhere along here, we need to give it power. So I'll just use an energy acceptor so we can power this controller in the middle. And now this is online, and all of those P2Ps are back online. So what's happening now is we have this red network. That's all of our P2P tunnels. And with it, I have access to 12 sides of this controller, and I can link these P2Ps. So this one can go to this one. So there's 32 channels. And then that one is a new one that can go to these 4. So on this, we're using 5 devices which is the 5 on the top cable, and then we're using 12 devices down here connecting to the controller. So together 5 and 12 is 17 P2P tunnels that are powered, and all of these cables are red. Then from this main controller, you can see it only sees the blue cables and the 64 ME drives that are these 32 and those 32. And we can also pull a blue cable over here and then put like a terminal, for example, on it like that. And now we'll take a drive or a cell, I'm sorry. And we can put the cell in one of these drives and put cobblestone inside of there. So again, this controller can see the drives, it can see the blue cables and the terminal, but it cannot see any of the P2P tunnels over here. This reverse is also true. So this guy can see the red cables and the P2P tunnels, but it can't see any of the drives or the terminals. If I put a terminal on the red cable, it doesn't connect because it's dense. But if I do that, you can't see the cobblestone in there because we don't have access to any of the drives. So you might set up your controller this way, and with one cable going out, you can basically power all of your AE2 machines with those. And since this cable is only using 5 channels, we still have room to add another 27 P2P tunnels that can each output 32 channels each. So that's how P2P tunnels, ME P2P tunnels can help you organize your channels throughout your base. I hope that was helpful. That's pretty much, I don't think I'm missing anything about P2P tunnels. Hopefully I covered everything, but I hope I did a good and clear enough job of explaining this so you guys can understand and not be scared of using P2P tunnels. It can help you with organization a lot. The time has finally come to talk about autocrafting with applied logistics. This is basically the highlight of the mod. It's one of the biggest features it holds, and one of the most amazing things about modded Minecraft is the ability to be able to tell your ME system, hey, craft me this thing, and it goes ahead and does it. To get set up with autocrafting, we will need a few different things, and I have all those blocks down here in my inventory, and I'm going to kind of explain them individually. So the first thing we have are these molecular assemblers, and this is just a crafting table, basically. So let me show you a little molecular assembler setup, and we will use a hopper. So whatever this thing makes is going to go into this thing, and this is going to make another thing. And you can see that there is a pattern icon over here. So let's go ahead and make some patterns. These guys, blank patterns. I'll make a bunch of these because we will be using a lot of them. And in order to encode patterns, we will need a pattern encoding terminal. And we will also use a pattern access terminal so we can access all of the things. I'll show you that in a second. All right, so I'm going to set those guys up just right here. So there's our encoding terminal and our access terminal over there. All right, and let's give these guys some power with the energy acceptor. Okay, so we have the energy acceptor here, and you can see these molecular assemblers are lit up. That means that they're working. And the molecular assemblers are basically just crafting tables, and you put up whatever pattern in here, and when you feed it the ingredients, it crafts it. So let's go ahead and encode a pattern. So we put our blank patterns inside of the pattern encoder, and let's say I want to make oak planks. Right, so that one log turns into 4 oak planks, and I go ahead and encode that. And then we're going to use these oak planks to, let's say, make a chest. So I will also encode that pattern. In this first molecular assembler, we will put the pattern to turn 1 oak log into 4 oak planks, and then this one is going to turn it into a chest. So let's grab some logs. And when we put these oak logs in there, you can see that it turned into 4 oak planks, and then it came into here. So I can put another one in there. And now this went ahead and made a chest. And I guess they push to other devices. So maybe we can just do this and put that pattern over there. And if we put, you can see that here is the chest that we made. So these molecular assemblers are what do the actual crafting. But obviously we don't want to set it up like that because then we won't be able to request it from our system. So that is where the pattern provider comes in. The pattern provider needs to be connected to our system, first of all. And now you can see that it is online. And then that goes next to a molecular assembler. Now, when we put these 2 patterns in here, it shows up as this in our system. So let me take all those out. And let's say I want to craft 2 chests. And I press next, and that's going to require the oak and the oak planks and to make the chest. But you can see it says no coprocessors available. That is referring to these coprocessors as well as a crafting storage. This is required to do auto crafting with the pattern providers. And the way this works is you make a multi-block of these coprocessors. So I'll set up something like so, and we need to make a couple more coprocessors. This has to be a rectangular shape, so it cannot be a weird thing like that. But you see, as soon as I do that, it turns into this multi-block structure, and we connect it. And this is called a CPU, so the crafting computer. And it's made of coprocessors as well as crafting storage. The crafting storage holds on to the intermediate items as it's crafting. So in this case, let's say we didn't have any oak logs. When it pulls out the planks, when it pulls out the oak logs and turns them into planks, the planks go to this crafting storage to wait and then come back here to turn into chests. So let's take out all of our planks. It's 5,000. Let's not do that. Let's just go ahead and do this. So now we have this set up, and then the coprocessors are what actually handle the crafting jobs. So right now we have 1 CPU. That means we can have 1 craft going on at a time. So if we take a look at chest, and let's say we want to make 10 chests. So you can see that when we start, the chests in here are being made. Okay, and that it just made the 10 chests. So we can make this go a little bit faster by adding more of these molecular assemblers around our pattern provider. And we can even put one here, and the channels will pass through. The molecular assemblers don't require any channels, but the pattern provider does. So you can see this whole thing is just using 1 channel. And now when we do 10 chests, you can see the pattern provider split the recipe jobs between all of these molecular assemblers. So this is how you can craft anything in a crafting table, but we can do something more like a furnace, for example. So the way you do that is with another pattern provider, and we hook that up, and let's grab a furnace like this aluminium furnace, and we place that over there. We need to power the furnace. So let's grab another gate, and then make sure we have the augment. And you want to set the side inputs. So the pattern providers will, automatically push ingredients into whatever machine that it's touching to, whether it's like a furnace or the molecular assembler. The molecular assembler just handles crafting table recipes, but processing recipes are handled in machines. So this pattern provider will push automatically the items into the furnace, but it will not pull them back out. So you need to handle that yourself. In this case, our furnace from the backside is going to receive those inputs, and we're going to have it also push back from that side, and we can turn on auto eject, auto output. So the furnace is going to push the recipe that it crafted back into the pattern provider, and it'll go into the return inventory. If I put something in the return inventory, it goes into our system over here. So here's 6 flukes. I put that in the return inventory. It's back in our system. So that's how you can push the items back into it. If whatever machine you're trying to automate doesn't have the ability to auto output, then you have to figure out how to put it in there. A simple way to do that is use an import bus. So you can use an import bus connected with a cable to your pattern provider, and this will pull the items into the pattern provider, hence going back into the system. So let's make a processing pattern for this. And a very simple one we can do is just stone. So we want to smelt stone into, or cobblestone into stone. And you can see this came down into a processing pattern. So when we encode it, you see how this one is purple on the sides, but if you look at this one, it's blue. The blue ones are for crafting patterns, and the purple ones are processing. And when we use the access terminal here, you can see that it shows the pattern provider for our furnace. So we can put this here, and the pattern goes in here. So in this case, in this pattern provider that we have no access to it because it's surrounded by the molecular assemblers, we can interact with the patterns through the access terminal. Okay, so now we have the ability to craft stone. So if I look up stone and I middle click on it, if you already have stone there, you can press middle click to initiate a craft. And let's say I want to make 1,000 stone. Press next. It says that that is available. And you can see the pattern provider is pushing all of those items in here, and it's going back into the system. All right, and there it is, 1,000 stone automatically crafted. So this is the base setup for Applied Energistics 2 Autocrafting, but Applied Energistics has a lot of really amazing add-on mods. Things like ExtendedAE, mega cells, advanced AE. So with those add-on mods, if you have them in your pack, definitely use them because it takes this to a whole nother level. So let's go ahead and upgrade this setup just a little bit more with higher tier. So these coprocessors, these crafting coprocessors only offer one crafting unit. So if you take a look over here, we have 11 coprocessors available, but I want to go ahead and make the coprocessors from mega cells, which offers 4 in each block. So we need these mega crafting units, and we had, what was it, 11? 11 coprocessors. So how many was this one? Hold on, let's make this first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So these guys was giving us 11 coprocessors, and now this one should give us 44. There we go. So now we have 44 coprocessors, and this will just be able to handle more crafts simultaneously. So this this pattern provider can only hold 9 recipes inside of it. So if you wanted to craft something more than 9 recipes, then you need more. So over here, we can put another one. And now you can see it's using 2 channels. So now we can connect all the other sides of this as well. And then we can put another one here, for example, and connect all the sides. And this is not the most ideal setup because this molecular assembler is being shared by both of these pattern providers. So if this one is using this one, this pattern provider will not have access to it because it'll already be busy doing a job. But this will be totally a fine setup for us for now. And we can link up to 8 pattern providers with this cable going to it, because machines, Applied Energistics machines, can handle 8 channels between them. Even if we put a dense cable, we can still only do 8 pattern providers here. Okay, so with that monstrosity in the way, let's take a look at some of the other options. So we already took a look at the Mega Cells one, which just offers more bigger crafting storages and more coprocessors. But the really nice setup we want to use is from ExtendedAE. So we want to use the assembler matrix, and this is a big multi-block. You can make it up to a 7x7 multi-block, and this will basically replace your molecular assembler and pattern providers, and it's on steroids. It does super fast crafts, and it can hold hundreds of patterns in just the one multi-block. So you can completely replace this and put it on steroids with just one multi-block, and we'll build that over here. And then in order to replace our coprocessing units, we have the next thing from Advanced AE, which is the quantum computer. So this is also a large multi-block you can do as a 7x7, and this exchanges, or it replaces your CPU. So this will give you your coprocessors and crafting storage. But you can see, in order to craft something like this data entangler, you need to make all of these things, and you need to make these things, and you need to make these things, and 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 these things. So in order to do these crafts, it's so many different things, subcrafts that you need to do, that it doesn't make sense to do this by hand. I mean, look at like all these freaking things that you need. So we're gonna want to automate it. That's why we set up just this basic applied energistics autocrafting, just so we can autocraft the better autocrafts, if that makes sense, the better autocrafting machines. So the assembler matrix is a little bit easier to craft than the quantum computer, so we're going to start with that one first. But if you take a look at this mod, all of these things that we make do not work in a normal crafting table. You have to create them in the crystal assembler. And so this is a processing recipe for this guy. So, and then when you try to make this guy, you see that we need a new block called the Entro infused ingot. And the way this works is you need Entro dust, but to get Entro dust, it's crushing an Entro crystal, but the Entro crystal, like, how do you make it? The way it starts is with the Entro seed. So you make an Entro seed, and you take a Fluix block. You put the Fluix block down, you right click, and you get a budding Entro Fluix, and this will start growing Entro crystals for you. The thing with this block is, you know how there's the flawless budding crystal that doesn't degrade? This will degrade. So we want to keep it from degrading, and we can repair it by using the crystal fixer. But we need the assembler to make that. So let's go ahead and just grab some growth accelerators for now. 4 will do, and then we'll use some, we can just use an energy acceptor. Okay, we're gonna put the energy acceptor here and cover that with cables, grab a gateway, or not a gateway, a enter gate. So now you'll see that these guys are on and sparkling, and you see how fast these are growing. So now we get these Entro crystal clusters, and once they're fully grown, you can break them down into Entro crystals. And we can use that to crush into Entro dust and throw inside of water with gold and lapis, and we will get the Entro infused ingot, which can be used to make the machine frames and stuff and the crystal assembler. So I'm going to farm these up really quickly, and you see how now it's a half Entro Fluix. So after you do this a little bit, it is going to degrade, and you're going to have to repair it, or you're going to have to make a new one. So instead of doing this by hand, let's take a block breaker, and we can automate this by putting it over there. And we do need to filter this. So we want to only do the Entro cluster. So we pull that in here. We're going to give it our fortune pickaxe, and we need to set the distance so it's doing both of those blocks. Okay, and you want to make sure this is on allow list, so it only mines that. We give it our pickaxe and some power, and that'll start mining those Entro crystals. So after a while, this turns into a Certus quartz block, and we're gonna have to replace it by doing that again, and then it'll continue to grow. Thought I'd show you guys this tiny little automation I set up here. That's totally temporary. We'll later be able to use the crystal fixer to keep this going. But for now, we have this block breaker that's breaking our block, but I also added the Certus quartz block. So when it expires, this will break the Certus quartz block. And then we have a block placer that has Fluix blocks that's going to place it in that same spot. And then above that, we have an advanced clicker that'll click in the intro seeds in that same block. So as soon as that expires, this will break the Certus quartz block. This will place the Fluix block, and this will right click the seed onto it, making another one, just like that. So you just watched it happen. And then over here, we have a drawer with an item collector that's collecting the Entro crystals in here. So I'm going to leave this here and go have some chicken wings and enjoy my lunch. And then hopefully when I get back, we'll have a bunch of intros so we can set up the rest of the stuff. Woohoo! We are back. Chicken was delicious. Ooh-wee. Let's... I apologize. Let's keep going. What are we doing? This episode is diabolical. Bear with me, guys. We are getting there. We were making these crystal assemblers from ExtendedAE. So we need some of these guys. Let's make 4 of them for now, and that's what we're missing. So we need some of these Entro infused ingots, which is the dust. So let's grab a stack of those to go in the crusher. And then we need golden lapis, and we're gonna just toss all these guys in. You used to be able to hold Control Shift and press Q to throw in everything of the same type, but inventory tweaks was removed from the pack because of some duplicating glitch things, allegedly. So now we don't have that anymore, which kind of sucks, but we'll get over it. All right, here we have these guys, and we can build our... I'll do a few of those. Our crystal assemblers. So let's go ahead and yeet this guy, and we're gonna put that there. And so the way these crystal assemblers are, the side matters. So you see how this side has the little purple circle thing? That's where you feed it power. So if that side is not facing the pattern provider, this machine will not receive power and it won't work. So if you place it like that, that's wrong. You're gonna have a bad time. Do it this way. And if we connect it like that, it should connect, and this device is online and using one channel. Perfect. So now we can automate these guys by putting crafting patterns in here in the pattern provider. But we need to set this to auto export, and we're going to enable the pattern provider side. So auto export, do the configuration and enable that. So it's going to push the finished crafts into there. And if you take a look, if you press U on this guy and look at the recipes, some of these things require water, some require lava. Is it anything we care about? Water is easy. We just make the infinity water cell. We just need some buckets. And we'll use the eternal water bucket. Ta-da. Now our applied energistic system has infinite amounts of water, like that. So let's set up a quantum entangle porter for lava, because we'll need it for ExtendedAE as well. And we'll use a storage bus, and we'll just stick that here for now. And this is going to go on our lava channel. Let's reset all the sides. Go to fluids, and where the storage bus is, it'll be input, output. And this is set to lava. So now if we look at lava, we have 256 buckets in our system. So now we have lava available to us also, and this is connected to our create hose pulley in the nether that's giving us infinite lava. All right. So with these crystal assemblers, we can now start crafting the crystal assembler, and I will put down on the screen as well as in the description below the number of blocks all of these things need. But before we can do that, we have to create the crafting patterns. So let's go ahead and make all of these things. So this needs to be made in a crafting pattern, as well as the walls. And I'm going to try the glass too. This is new. So let's see what that's about. Right. Those guys go over there, and then we'll put those here. And we're also going to need to make all of the subcrafts. So, for example, oh, did I do the molecular assembler? I did not. We need this as well. So all of these recipes are, I'm going to put on our thing. So like molecular assemblers, we need to make those. We need to know how to make annihilation cores. We need to know how to make formation cores. We need to know how to make the crafting table and the glass. So all of these things we kind of have to set up. And a little note here, when you are doing a crafting pattern, and let's say you're looking at the pattern encoding terminal, when you look at a recipe and hover over the plus sign, you see that this glows blue. That means it knows that recipe. So it doesn't know how to make any of these things, but it knows how to make the molecular assembler. So the acceleration card will also go ahead and make, and do you see that this didn't glow? So we can add that in there. And if you noticed, when we do this, where was it? When we put these guys in here, you see that there's a plus sign on there. That means it knows how to make that. So that's another way you can tell. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set up all of these recipes, the ones in here and also the ones in here. So we can come back and make all of them and have them auto-crafted. You guys don't need to sit here watching me make a million recipes. Sometimes you will run into an issue like this. So we have the crafting core in there, and you can see that when we try to make 95 of these guys, it says it's missing crafting tables. But when we take a look in here, you can see that we do have our crafting table recipe here. So why is that happening? Well, sometimes it uses the JI uses the tags for something different. And if you ever need to edit a pattern, you can just put it back in here. And you can see that's not the issue. So it's the regular molecular assembler pattern that we need to check. So we're going to put that guy in there, the regular molecular assembler pattern we put in here. And this crafting table seems like maybe it's the wrong one. So I'm going to drag it from JEI and then click this to set it again. And then we will make this one and make sure this is the normal one as well. And let's see if that fixes our issues. Okay, so that just resetting the recipe like that fixed that issue. We also need to make concurrent processors, and that's done with the Entro Crystals, and we can just dump all these things into our trusty SFM automation for these Inscribers. And look at that, getting concurrent processors. Look how fast that is. Never have to do anything by hand if you have Super Factory Manager available. All right, let's keep going. Okay, that should be everything we need. So let's take a look at extended and assembler. So we are going to need 95 of these craft cores. This is the big one. So let's start that up, and you can see that it's making all of those. And make sure you have acceleration cards in these crystal assemblers, by the way. So that's going to go ahead and make those. And you can take a look at the crafting jobs over here. And you can also view it from this and cancel it from here if you need to. So you can see the progress here and everything. And this is a little bit slow for now, but we're going to wrap up everything very, very quickly. Don't you worry. Let's go ahead and queue up another craft. So these frame blocks, we are going to need 68 of those. Let's see if we have coprocessors available. We do not. Because we only have one CPU, we can only do one craft at a time. So we have to wait for these guys to finish, and then we can queue another craft. But once we set up the quantum computer, we're going to have, instead of one CPU and 44 coprocessors, we're going to have still one CPU, but it's going to have 3,800 coprocessors, and it can share those coprocessors between crafts, so you don't need more than one. Just one is enough, which is super cool. But you can see that is done. So let's start by building with the frame. So this is, we're going to do a 7x7. So it will go just like this. Then the walls need to be either these wall frames or matrix walls or the glass. So we're going to try the glass out. But the back, and by the way, this can be much easier with a building gadget. So let's set it to a vertical wall and put it to 5, like so. And let's do the glass on these sides. See how that works. And then we change this to horizontal and do that. And on the inside, we fill it with all the rest of the stuff. And our speed cores. It doesn't matter how you place this, I'm just OCD. Right, so you can see this is offline, but if we grab a cable and it's glowing blue, that means it's online. And with the glass, you can see what's inside of it. So that's kind of cool. I think that's a new addition, but anyways, now this is how many patterns it can hold in here. It's a lot. So, which means we can remove all of these guys. And these guys are going to spill out all of our patterns, and we just dump all the patterns in there. You can see that is only a tiny fraction of what it can actually hold. Okay, so that sets up our max size assembler matrix, which basically replaces all of your pattern providers and molecular assemblers. So next, after that, we're going to take a look at the quantum computer. And that is added by advanced AE, advanced space AE. And that, just like how the extended AE mod uses these crystal assemblers to kind of make its things, the advanced AE has something similar called the reaction chamber right here. And this will be handling most of those crafts. So let's make the recipe for the reaction chamber and a bucket and all these things. And we're going to use an extended pattern provider now that we can make those, and the reaction chamber. We'll make 4 reaction chambers. And these guys we can set up over here. And they will take acceleration cards. And we do want to also set the auto output side to the pattern provider. And I like to turn off all the other sides. All right, so those guys should be set up. We just need to connect this to our system. So let's grab a P2P tunnel because we know how those work now. And we'll link that on the bottom of our pattern provider. And let's grab Fluix cables and take this all the way to our controller, like so. All right, we use the memory card to link that P2P to that P2P, and we need to power this, so let's make another energy acceptor. And we are going to clean this up in the next episode, but just for now, this is how we'll do it. All right, so this is powered now, 660A. This is also 660A, and these guys should be online, and the pattern provider is working, and we're using one channel for that. And we're going to do the same thing with these guys. So let's also move these guys over to here, and we'll use an extended. Oh, we can't because I took that off. Let's do this real quick. And we'll use another P2P here. And we can make this one be the same, because with that one face, we can put 32 channels. Over here in this stack, we can go up 8 blocks. So this will hold 8, that will hold 8. So together that's 16. That means we can do 2 more stacks on the same P2P tunnel. So if we take a look, this guy is online and working. So let's request an extended pattern provider. Look how slow that is without acceleration cards. All right, and we replace that with the extended variety, and it can hold 4 times as many recipes. And we can set the rest of our assemblers down, give them their acceleration cards. And make sure the outputs are enabled, and make sure that it's facing the correct way so it can receive power. Okay, so now let's make all of the things. So what I like to do is I like to go, this is going to be our permanent setup over here for these reaction chambers. And what I'd like to do is, instead of making the patterns when I need to, since I've already have those set up, why don't we just look at the reaction chamber, and we can press U on it and just add all of the recipes from this that we need. It's only 20 recipes total, but we don't need all of them. But something like Sky Bronze, we'll need that. So I'll go ahead and make it. I don't need it now, but at some point I will. Same thing with Sky Steel. So instead of dropping things in the world to create them, we're going to do it with the reaction chamber. And this will basically automate that part of applied energistics. These Certus budding stuff I don't care about, but these other osmium things, I will make those. All right, so I have all the recipes that I'm going to ever want. Just toss them in there. And that is all set up. So let's take a look at the quantum computer. And make all of the recipes for that. We will need the core. We will need all these things. And the two things, the data entangler and the multi-threader, get made inside of the pattern provider, or inside of the crystal assembler here. So that should get us everything. So let's see if we can't make one of these cores. We're missing quantum processors, so we need to automate those. Well, I'm going to handcraft them for now. We're going to take a look at the crystal assembler and look through all of the recipes for that too. So like the extended export bus, all of these recipes I'm going to make as well and put it in there, because now we have that in our final area. All right, and I have all of those recipes set up. So let's make the extended IO port and acceleration cards. So let's take a look at this guy. So we have our normal IO port, and this is getting singularities at not a super fast rate. But if we look at this guy and put all the acceleration cards in there, right, now take a look. This is going much, much faster for the singularities. Let's go ahead and make these structures. We will need 218 of them. And by the way, you can link your building gadgets to your applied energistics and it'll pull things out of there. Super nice. So here I'll put one, oops, over here. And we're going to do horizontal wall 7x7. So look, I don't have any in my inventory, but since it's inside of my applied energistics system, we can just place them. Ta-da! We finally did it. We finally made all of the ingredients required to complete our 7x7x7 quantum computer. This multi-block is extremely expensive. I mean, it takes over 150,000 redstone. It takes tens of thousands of processors. It's very, very expensive. But now that we have all the pieces, let's just go ahead and make it, and we'll be all done with this. I want to set this on 5x5 surface, or not surface, horizontal wall. So I'm going to put 2 layers down, and this, it doesn't matter how you make it, as long as you just put the things inside and then the outside is these structure pieces. But I like to put the core directly in the middle because I'm special like that. And then we're going to put more. It's just a bunch of these accelerators. And then this middle 3, we're going to put our storage. So it's 256 million storage. Then we put our data entangler and our multi-threader. The multi-threader and the data entangler multiply the amount of coprocessors and crafting storage you have by 6. So they're really expensive, but they're good to have. You can only have one of them. Okay, and then the rest we fill in with those. and it is complete. You can see it kicked on. If we take a look at it, now we have 8,784 coprocessors and 3 billion crafting storage. So yeah, we're never going to need any other CPU. So let's break this one down, and we'll just connect this directly. And this whole thing just uses one channel. Okay, now in terms of crafting, we have the best crafting system set up with the assembler matrix and the quantum computer from ExtendedAE and AdvancedAE. There is one other mod that we need to get into. I know this is a super long episode, but I want to finish everything with Applied Logistics today. So we're going to keep chugging along. And that next thing is called AppliedFlux. And AppliedFlux is an add-on mod to Applied Logistics that allows you to store power inside of your Applied Logistics system. And it's really nice for automation because you can feed machines directly through the pattern providers. So you see how these guys are connected to the machines. So for processing setups, we can put an induction card inside of the pattern provider and it will power the machine that is touching. So these guys, since they're from the mod, they can use AE power, and they grab power directly from the pattern provider. But things like the crushers and a furnace or any other machine from any other mod will not be able to pull power from those unless we put an induction card in there. And that makes it much nicer for our setups because then we don't have to have an extra, an extra cable or gate on there to power the machine. So it just makes the setup much, much cleaner. So let's get started with that. First, we'll need an FE cell. And if you look at AppliedFlux, I've already made the components, AppliedFlux. So let's just make a 1 million one, I think will be good to get us started. Where is it? Here. So we need some blocks of redstone and then these 120 of the energy processors, which requires 120 of those. So we just need some redstone blocks. Pretty soon we're gonna have everything automated, so this won't be a problem. So I have 120 of those, then we'll require silicone and redstone. And these guys can go in here and get crafted. Something with Applied Logistics is if a recipe requires a fluid, you can turn on fluid substitutions. And if we have water inside of our system and a bucket, it'll know to be able to do that. So just make sure you have fluid substitutions on for stuff like that. And now, see, it has 9 available waters that it made these guys. And we're just going to smelt it by throwing it in our tablet. And here it is. So then we have the 1 million thing. We make the storage housing, and now we have an FE storage cell. And the way we put power inside of our system is by using a flux accessor. So this storage cell is going to go inside of our drive. And you can see that my player transmitter already put some power into it. But that's going in there. And then we take this flux accessor somewhere on our system. Let's just say I'll temporarily set it up here and then I can make it nicer in the next episode. So we'll just put this guy here and we could put some gates on it, like 2 gates. And now if you look, because these can both pull and push and the flux accessors can both push and pull. So we need to make sure this spirited ender gate on its north side is set to extract. Same thing over here. This guy on its west side needs to be extract. Okay, so now you can see that's getting dumped out, and we have FE going into our power going into our FE system, or ME system. So with that, now we can use induction cards and power different machines with them. Now, with all of this set up, we can, all of our crafting table patterns are basically set up, and they are going to be incredibly fast. But we still will be limited with processing with machines. So we want to expand that as well. So let's take a look at the processors for these guys, these processors for applied energistics. I want to go ahead and speed those guys up a little bit, and we can set that up over here. And we're going to be using circuit slicers. We'll need 64 of these that I will set up. All right, we're making slicers. So again, 64 of these guys. And then we will, so these slicers will make your printed stuff, and they're very, very fast, and they do blocks at a time. And our crystal assemblers will go ahead and combine those into patterns. So we're going to need 16 extended pattern providers for these guys. We'll need a bunch of these patterns. We will need our building gadget. So let's take a look at the slicer and set up all of these recipes for the slicer. So we will start with printed silicon. Okay, so these are all of the printed circuits that we can make, and I've made the patterns for them. You only need to make one pattern or one set of patterns. And let's say over here, I want to set up this little setup. So we're going to put our extended pattern provider down, and I will put all of those patterns in there. And then we need to set up these the circuit slicers. And these guys, you see how it has the hole on this side? So that is the side that it can receive power from. So we want to set it like that. That way it can be hooked up. And once that's done, let's grab our acceleration cards. We'll make a couple hundred and put all of our acceleration cards in there and set this up to auto export to the pattern provider. So the pattern provider will push the recipe in here, and then this guy, once it's crafted, will export the recipe back into the pattern provider going into our system. Same thing over here. We set it up with 4 acceleration cards and enable the auto output to the pattern provider. Okay, and this is where it gets a little bit easier. So we have one layer set up, and we're going to basically move this up 8 blocks. And so we'll have a tower of 8, which means this will be able to, this one setup will have 32 circuit slicers, and we'll set up another one next to it, and we'll have the 64 total. But there's an easier way of doing that than setting up all of the recipes and putting, like making these patterns 16 different times. That's nonsense. So here's one. We're going to set down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And then we'll use our building gadget, and the building gadget will memorize its location. So we copy the one we're looking at and then place it. We just back up a little bit. So like so. Oh, and you know what? Before we move on, before you put this one on, you want to use your memory card and control right click on it. So now it says copied the device configuration to the memory card. So now we can put this one back on and paste that. And see, it says it loaded the configuration. So it put all of those recipes. It just duplicated it in there without you having to manually make it. Just make sure you have blank patterns in your inventory. So you can see like all these other ones are completely empty. We just go through and right click them all. And now they all have patterns. Isn't that cool? If you don't know that and you set all of this up manually, I'm sorry. But let's do that same thing again, like that. And then we copy this guy and we copy this guy. So now those guys are all set up. And same exact thing with this one. We go below here and we copy the device settings on this one. And once we paste it in here, it'll do the acceleration cards as well as the auto output. So if you take a look, there's acceleration cards, and that check mark means that it's auto exporting and it's set to be enabled on the pattern provider. So we paste that into all of these guys. And now on this side, it's a different configuration. So we're going to copy it again and paste one more time, copy again, paste one more time. And last but not least, this side. All right, just double checking. So these guys are all set up. Now we're going to do the exact same thing over here. And we'll go copy those guys. So these all have the patterns. I don't know what happened to my other two circuit slicers, but all right, and copy. And just like that, these are all done, except we are out of acceleration cards. You go through these acceleration cards like candy. All right, so our circuit slicers are set up and they can very, very quickly make the circuits. So they'll do the very quickly. And the circuits right now are fully automated. So now we want to do the processors on this side. And again, we need more extended pattern providers, 16 of them. And we set those guys up here. And now we need to make all of the processors. Right, so we can put those in there and then again, copy and paste. Then we set up our crystal assemblers. And again, remember crystal assemblers, these two dots, it has to be facing that way. So point it away from you. And once this is set up, we're going to do the same thing. We are going to put acceleration cards in there, set the output, and make sure it's enabled towards to push into the pattern provider. You do have to set each side manually. So let's do that. All right, fully built. Now we can just copy from there, and I bet you I'm going to need more acceleration cards. Okay, and all 64 of these crystal assemblers are set up and ready to make processors. So that's going to be really, really fast. Now we just have to hook them up to our network. So I went ahead and finished everything up with our crafting. So you can see these guys are all online. I added enriching factories, 8 of those, and 8 crushers. And these guys all have their respective recipes inside. So I just loaded those up the same exact way as I did these guys. The only difference here is these pattern providers have induction cards inside of them so that they can be powered from the FE stored inside of our FE cell that we made from AppliedFlux. So same thing with this one. So this also has an induction card to power these 2 furnaces. I'll make 2 more once I have more vibranium, but right now I'm low on vibranium. And then we will have half of this stack. So these assemblers are the ones that are doing the other recipes from the assemblers. And then the other ones on this side are the ones that are just making our processors. So I like to keep them separate. That way, if I'm crafting something like a huge 256 million crafting processors, I still have assemblers left over for other jobs. So these 2 stacks, these 64 will be dedicated for processors and the other ones will do different recipes. And then we have all of these available to set up more machines as we grow into other mods. And then down here, I went ahead and set up a subcontroller for our P2Ps. And we have the white cable that's connecting directly to our controller, and the black cable, that's our P2P thing. So these two don't mix together. And we have 4 stacks of 8 pattern providers over here, and the same thing on this side. So it's 32 pattern providers and 32 pattern providers for a total of 64 channels. That means we are going to have to use 2 P2P tunnels to take care of that. So if we take a look at these two guys, these are the ones that are carrying 32 channels each. The one on the right goes to these 4 stacks on there at the bottom. So that one's doing 8 channels. This one's doing 8 channels. This one's doing 8 channels. So those guys are all connected with just one cable to this controller. And then the one on the left is connected to these 4. So those two are providing all the 64 channels for those devices. And then we have dedicated P2Ps going from these controllers to these quantum links. And that way we can use up to 32 channels on here without any of our devices going offline. So that's all set up. And then I also went ahead and moved over. What is going on with these bats? I also went ahead and, oh my goodness. I went ahead and moved our power generation down here. And if you've heard some people complain about the FE cell, and they're like, I don't want my power being stored in something that requires power to run it. If I run out of power, then I won't be able to access it. If you know those guys, this setup, the way I have it set, basically prevents that from happening because it prioritizes our applied energistic system over the FE cell. And just to describe this, we have a wireless connector that's connected to our controller up there. So this is basically, imagine a cable going to our controller. The energy acceptor is what's powering our controller up there. And then below this Nitro cell is a flux accessor. And the code I have for Super Factory Manager, again, if you guys don't know, Super Factory Manager does things line by line. So whatever you do first is prioritized over stuff that comes later. So we are first outputting power to the energy cube, and then the player transmitter, and then the flux accessor. So all of the power that's available is first going to go into this cube, and this cube is pushing out, auto ejecting to the energy acceptor, which is powering our controller. So that's where the power is going first, into this energy acceptor. For some reason, Super Factory Manager can't directly output power to the energy acceptor. If you do that, it just doesn't work. So I had to use the energy cube as an intermediary between the two. But the nice thing that this energy cube also offers is that if you noticed, I also have it inputting from the flux accessor. So just in case we're not producing enough power, if we're like doing something crazy and using a ton of power, then it will also be able to pull power from our FE cell, from our system, and it's going to pull that into its buffer as well and push all of that into the energy acceptor. So this should make sure that our ME system is always powered and working. And then whatever power is left over goes into our player transmitter to make sure this is full. And then once that's full, the rest of the power is going into the flux accessor. So our FE cell is the last thing that power is going into, and that's where all the surplus power goes and gets stored. But with this setup, it makes sure that all of our available power goes into our ME system first, so that we don't have issues with that. And then the EnderCell over here, we're gonna leave that on top, and facing down is going to be receive mode. So this is receiving power from our FE cell to power all of the gates and stuff that we've been using around our world. So our gates are now coming from here, from our FE cell. Believe it or not, I still have a list of about another 10 things I wanted to talk about. Stupid bat. A list of another like 10 things I wanted to talk about at this episode, but it's going so long. I'm losing my mind. So I think I'm going to end it here. Next episode, we're going to come back and set up the SATH controller. which is going to be insane. Stay tuned for that. That's going to give us like 21,000 channels to use that we'll never need. But we're going balls to the wall in this series. Anyways, I will leave you here for now. If you guys stuck around for this long, my mind is blown and I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned a lot. I try to cover everything, but still some other stuff to talk about, which we'll get to eventually. Anyways, thank you. See you later.